Unless you've been living under a rock recently, you have seen or heard the two presidential candidates for the 2017 presidential election, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton is the Democratic nominee for the presidency. She is a former Secretary of State in the Obama administration. She is also a wife of former President Bill Clinton, and she is also a former senator from the city of New York. She will also, state of New York. She is also the first woman nominee for a major party in history. And if she wins this election, she will be the first woman ever to be the president of the United States. The Republican candidate is Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a businessman and also a TV producer. You may recognize him from his reality television show, The Apprentice or The Celebrity Apprentice. The Apprentice is a reality show about a group of contestants who compete doing various tasks to earn a position in one of Donald Trump's commercial businesses. Each show, he ends with making a decision in a boardroom on which contestant has failed to meet his expectations or to prove their qualifications. And he dismisses that contestant by a catchphrase known as "You're fired." That catchphrase became coined from that show and was also trademarked by Donald Trump. Both candidates have promised a lot during their campaigns this season. Donald Trump says he will make America great again by building a wall on our border against Mexico and having the Mexican government pay for it. Hillary Clinton says she can make America strong again by imposing taxes on the wealthiest of Americans to add to our federal revenue and reduce our budget deficit. Those things sound good. However, I feel that one of the most important issues we should be focusing on this election season is setting congressional term limits. I feel that whomever is elected should set a policy that will set term limits on the number of years that Congress people can serve. So today I will be discussing congressional term limits and the pros and cons of setting such a policy. The practice of term limits goes back to at least ancient Rome and Greek days. In the U.S., term limits date back to the colonial period, as the 22nd Amendment of the Constitution set term limits for presidents to be only able to serve 2 terms or the total of 8 years. The issues with term limits on Congress, however, have been recently and providing an ongoing debate for years now. In his book, Mark R. Levin discusses in the Liberty and Amendments, Restoration of the American Republic, he discusses setting term limits for Congress people to 12 years. That's the equivalent of 3 terms. He feels that it was sufficient enough time to get in, make a difference, and pass the torch on to someone else. Advocates for term limits are regular citizens of America, such as myself, Senators David Vitter, he's a Republican congressperson from Louisiana, and that's according to the Daily Journal Advocates, to say term limits could spur revival in this day and time. Jill Stein, who is the Green Party candidate for president, and according to GaryJohnson.org, he is a proponent of term limits as well. He is the Libertarian candidate for president. Rand Paul and a host of other elected officials, judges, and senators. Opponents of congressional term limits are special interest groups, because they don't want to lose their important investments that they have in these congressmen and women who have been in the institution forever. They've built relationships with these people, so they know that they have a vested interest there. Congress members, of course, don't want term limits due to the perk of benefits of power, and obvious reasons. And regular citizens also oppose term limits on congressional members. They just don't see a need for it. Congressional term limits, however, have been set at the state legislative level since approximately 1990, and Oklahoma and Colorado were the first states to enact congressional term limits, with the most recent state being Nebraska setting congressional state legislative term limits in 2000. According to research done by the Joint Protection Term Limits and a Joint Project on Term Limits, a unique coalition of academic, state legislative, council of governments, and scholars from various universities, their research provided mixed results. What they discovered was that in the beginning, the turnover would be high due to the amount of Congress people who would have to leave their seats, as they would be over the mandated term limit. However, they did say that after time, it would begin to balance out, so they cannot see an effective change anything right now based on their current studies. They also discovered that legislative leaders would try to battle for their positions within the first term, and try to establish their foothold and power in their position. Positions of power now are basically based on seniority and the committee experience that they had. And the most people who wield the most power in Congress are those who have served on certain committees and who have been there a long time. And the bottom line is that legislatures are resilient and highly adaptive institutions, and they continue to function efficiently under term limits. So there was really neither a definitive finding here or there that it has affected state legislatures negatively or positively. So further research needs to be done. So it could be argued that to set congressional term limits in the beginning, there wouldn't be an effect, but in effect later on, we could see positive things growing from that, such as new ideas and things of that nature that we'll discuss in just a second. There are 15 states that currently have state legislative term limits. A few of them are Arizona, Arkansas, California, Ohio, and Nevada. Some of the pros for setting term limits are to root out corruption. Since the time of our founding fathers, a general consensus states that people who are giving power will eventually be corrupted by it. So the people who have made careers out of being congressmen have become so familiar with these lobbyists and being provided kickbacks and perks of affording them opportunity and voting in certain ways that eventually they become poisoned by that power, and they want to stay in their seat just so they can keep it attained. Term limits will also ensure that there is not enough time to foster those relationships with those lobbyists, because new Congress people are often leery of those practices, and they wouldn't be able to establish those long-term relationships that afforded them favor. And term limits will also keep the Congress people aware of the laws that they pass, because they will soon return to regular population where they will have to live under the laws that they have created. And also another pro of setting term limits would be fresh blood, new ideas, bringing new strategies to the plate, bringing new insight to areas that may have been overlooked before is always a positive thing. But there are some cons that some say to setting term limits. And those are that we would lose experience. Career politicians should be valued for their experience, because if we do fill congressional seats with newcomers, we would lose that experience. Maybe we could set a policy where prior to getting to Congress, they have served in some form of state legislator, state Congress for a certain amount of time. We can require that, so by the time that they do get to the United States Congress, they have a wealth of experience under their belt that they can bring to the table from a smaller impacted level, and they still have knowledge that they can bring to the U.S. Congress. So there is an argument to that con that there are things that could be done for those people to have experience prior to getting elected to the United States Congress. Also, people that are against term limits think that it would be unfair to individuals who are not corrupt and that we would be forcing them out when they may be a proponent of things and fight corruption in their own political side. And also, with turnover, quite frankly, there is a lag in time and training, but that goes back to speak to the point that we could require them have a certain amount of experience before they even run for the United States Congress. The presidential candidates' positions on setting congressional term limits, well, Hillary Clinton has yet to answer that question, but Donald Trump is in favor of setting term limits for congressional members. So in conclusion, we have a huge decision to make this fall. Appointments to the Supreme Court will be made, and the trajectory of our nation will be headed in a new direction. In order to keep moving in the right direction, we need to keep progress going. So we need new and fresh blood in Congress, and therefore it is important that whoever wins this election will be interested in setting and maintaining congressional term limits. I hope that I have inspired you to get out and vote on November 8th or before, but more importantly, to recognize that congressional term limits are an issue we need to tackle this presidential term, and we need to tell members of Congress you're fired. Thanks for listening.